Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Somatic psychotherapy and non-duality. My guest, Scott Killaby. Welcome. Mihai. This is our 10th talk. And let's just, as they say in Romanian, let's get straight into the bread. We talked last time, we started to focus on addiction. And so for those of you who come straight to this one, I suggest you watch episode 9, where we go into working with addiction, causes of addiction, and the new model of recovery developed by Scott and Dan McClintock, right?
Correct.
So now we are going to go in more depth and more experiential and practical. But in a nutshell, addictions are very many. It's not because we are bad. It's some kind of innocent way to manage some suffering that we can't handle it. Some kind of malaise, some sense of lack, some feeling of unworthiness, shame, some sense that something is missing, some sense of being bad. Anyway, some type of psychological suffering or physical suffering or spiritual suffering. Anyway, there is some type of suffering that we want to transcend. We want to transcend or escape or alleviate, and we discovered some object. They call it in non-duality, some object that if I partake of that object, then the suffering will get some relief temporarily. Now, this object of addiction could be, the usual ones that everybody know, like meth, cocaine, marijuana, tobacco, alcohol. Some are legal, some are not legal. It's much more than that. I mean, there's porn, there is seeking love and dating. Not that dating is bad, but seeking fulfillment through the relationship, workaholic, Facebook, iPhone, all the time. If you go in airports and stuff, everybody's like, bam, bam. Sexual stuff, eating, spiritual seeking,
self-improvement, shopping,
self-improvement, seeking spiritual enlightenment, friends, all the going out. Anyway, so there are many things. So these are different types of addiction, which is like addiction will be anything that's some activity or that is compulsive that I'm engaging in order to not feel bad anymore. And that's a cycle that creates, then afterwards the bad feeling comes back again. Maybe it reinforces that, oh man, you're wasting your life, I'm a piece of shit, shame. So that's the idea with addiction. What is special and new in this new model approach is that basically we are not focusing on the behavior per se by limiting the behavior and stopping it and counting sobriety days as a sign of success. It's fine to do that, but that's not the breakthrough, which I find it very useful, is that don't focus on the behavior that you use to manage the pain. Go towards the pain and process the pain that is there. And by processing the pain, what you call the drivers, the suffering that we are trying to escape, by processing that suffering and diminishing that, there will be a simultaneous diminishing of the addiction, of the wanting, the craving. So the idea that if one does that, then the craving, the compulsion naturally diminishes up to a point where it is this so-called somatic no, when the body is like, I don't want this, man. No. And then there is this interesting stage of one is free from the substance, one doesn't need to use it, but also one is free to use, which we'll talk later. It could be tricky because we can lie to ourselves and stuff like that. But then even if we go and have chocolate, or we have some a joint or a spliff or something, it is not do it every day. It's more like like celebration, let's say, enjoyment of life, some champagne with some friends, whatever. So that's the in a nutshell what we talked last time. And I would like to go into, first of all, if you have any comments on this or any addition, and then I will go into what I would like to go this time.
Yeah, well, if I could just tell the story of when Dan came to live with me, because it brings life to the model. Otherwise, it sounds kind of theoretical, but if you can see it in someone's life, it makes much more sense. So when he came to me, he had already been involved in the old models. In other words, the people around him were focusing on whether he was using porn or not using porn. And the measure of success was when he had a certain number of days without porn. And though he was seeking approval through that, and every time he would relapse, that would bring up the shame and the deficiency story. So he was caught in this cycle of not focusing on the pain, focusing on the behavior, and then everybody else reinforcing that around him. So when he first came to live with me, one of the first things I said to him is, I said, "Are you still counting days?" For some reason, he never forgot that, because it was so outside of his worldview. Like, what do you mean not counting days? That's what we do in sobriety. But come to find out, or recovery, come to find out the counting of days was a real culprit in the relapsing. Because I think you and I talk about this, but the audience may not see it yet, is if I build my identity around the number of days or months or years I have, if I do use, it destroys the identity. It's very shame producing. You don't get the approval from the people around you anymore. So the one thing I did different from the very beginning was, okay, let's don't focus on counting days. Let's just look at the drivers that are there, the trauma, shame, deficiency story. So that was the first time he was able to focus on that. Because if you have everybody around you and yourself focusing on behavior, you'll just miss all of this. You can miss all of it. So by not focusing on behavior, and also showing him energetically that if he did use porn, it didn't mean anything to me. It didn't mean, like, because he'd been surrounded by people, like, that means something. I'm sorry, you did that again. And it sends this story that he's a failure and all the deficiency stories that come with that. So one of the things at the beginning is, like, when he did use, the next morning we would get up and have breakfast, and he would say, and you could tell the shame and the trauma that he was on, or from the past, because he was like, it was so hard for him to just tell me that he watched porn, where I didn't have a reaction to that, but it was so hard. He said, okay, I'm just going to regurgitate it. I'm just going to puke it out. I watched porn last night. And then I'd be like, okay. And then there was no real reaction to that. So that was his first opportunity to be around someone who didn't make it a bad thing. But that was just the beginning, because I think there are some people who think, well, if I just don't shame somebody, if I just love them unconditionally, that's enough. But it's more complicated than that. That's a good part of it. But the other part of it is all the drivers that were driving the behavior to begin with. But strangely, or maybe not so strangely, the counting days and that identity, that deficiency story, was one of the drivers. And the external pressure that he was experiencing from other people, you should quit, that ended up being a driver. So we had to undo all that. We had to not bring more into his recovery that just sabotaged him. So we looked at all the drivers, and he stayed with that. He learned how to look at with inquiry before and after porn use. And so he's telling this story publicly. He rarely watches porn now, but not because he's made a decision. That's the difference. It's like he didn't make a decision. It's just that his body, finally not focusing on the behavior, not counting days, not calling himself an addict, and dealing with the pain, the body started to respond differently to the porn, and he just didn't get the same charge out of it. The deficiency stories, the shame, and that's the reason. So if you've never heard that, if your only point of reference is, okay, here's the thing, using versus not using, it's such a false binary opposite, because first of all, even the people in old recovery programs who are saying they're not using are generally substituting that with something else. So they are still using. So it's not even a real duality in life. It's not like people are in one category or the other. Generally, there's a whole spectrum in between of using, substituting, and it's not like every time someone uses, they spiral down, for example. So one of the things I think that we're trying to do away from is the strict duality between using and not using, so that we don't build our identity either around either one. So using, I'm an addict, that identity, the shame, but then recovering addict, same thing, same addiction, but a different focus. Like the addiction is on not using. So by not focusing on that, it gives people more freedom or something to understand that it's all a matter of degree, and that compulsions come down over time. They're not like just falling away suddenly to where you go to not using. Sometimes the using gets decreased as the body starts to get clearer, and you're still using some. So in the using, not using paradigm, you don't fit anywhere in there. You're still using. But here we recognize and acknowledge matters of degree and a spectrum of experience where we can recognize success even if someone's still using something, because their relationship to the thing is changing over time, less compulsion. And again, there's no room for that measure of success in some old programs. So I think a lot of people are falling through the cracks because they don't fit in anywhere, and there's no freedom to really explore and be more open around all this, get rid of the old rules and try something different.
Yeah, so an important component is ideally if the family or the support system is aligned with this orientation, because as you said, external pressure, if the family is shaming or being disappointed or saying, dude, you have to do something about it, that only enforces, creates hiding, secrecy, more unworthiness or something, and more desire. And I know like in 12-step, theoretically, it's based on the loving community and the connection with higher power and unconditional acceptance. And theoretically, you use and you fuck up, you go back and they're like, hey, brother, welcome, we love you. However, you are welcome back. So I know that theoretically it's like that, and maybe practically, but also I'm aware that it could be some energetic, subconscious, subliminal, you have to start again. If you have more days, you get more chips. There's some kind of the rewarding and the status, the rank comes from a number of days. And I've seen people who achieve sobriety, but it seems like in the new model, because I've seen sobriety, they're sober. I mean, first of all, people are sober, they're going outside, everybody counts smoking like crazy, tobacco, so it's the phenomenon of shifting.
Coffee or something like that,
yeah, shifting addiction, shifting the object. But one can be sober and miserable. And for the new model of recovery, the idea is to be free and inner peace and real connection with inner and outer and God. Yeah, well, I can see in my experience, if I would say I would have some like more minor addictions, and as compared to other people I know, but definitely the use of marijuana. And so I could see that for years I would flip-flop between using and not doing anything about it, while in the back of my mind was some kind of man, what are you doing? Some kind of disappointment, some sense that I'm doing something wrong, that I'm spiritually deficient somehow, because also I very much focused on the enlightenment path, but not investigating the craving, not investigating what was happening at all, not mentioning to my non-duality teachers about that, was hiding this. I would go to satsang, after satsang, I was good. Maybe I will quit. I will not use for the week of the retreat with Francis, or I will stay at his house. I will not use because I know I want to go for the retreat, and then I come back, business as usual. And then sometimes I'll have periods like, fuck it, I need to stop it, man. I can't do this. I'm fooling myself like this. So sometimes there will be a wave of, enough. So I had a wave of that. And I mean, first of all, I would try to control it, which is one of my things, to control it. So I will put myself all this willpower thing. Okay, I can smoke just a few times, and then I will be like, okay, well, now I'm smoking kind of every day. I should have at least Monday off. Okay, so I will just have Monday off, but it was hard. And after a few weeks or months, Monday was on too. I'll go back to the same thing. And so anyway, this was not quite working. Then they will come into, okay, you know what? I'm done. So I will just stop. And I would say, okay, I'm going to do 40 days, like Jesus, Mm-hmm. Sorry. So 40 days. And then even those 40 days will change into like 6 months. I would not smoke for 6 months. There was no craving for that. I was like, oh, wow, I don't need it. It's awesome. At the same time, I was now using something else. Having a little bit more beer, having this kratom, having this other stuff. So shifting addiction. But I felt good that I wasn't smoking my primary. And then I would say, you know what? I think I'm good now. I would like to use, to enjoy marijuana from time to time. And I will start having once a week. And then I will say, okay, I can just use twice a week. And this will go on for a few weeks, up to the point it will go back to the same thing. So I wasn't processing the drivers. I wasn't processing those. So that's what is different now. I'm using this new model where I'm actually, I happened that I had this no to have a break. So I'm not using it in the same way, but I'm processing the drivers. And yeah, so if you have anything about that,
well, I wrote down here that with new model, the rules get thrown out eventually, I think. So, but for a while, we're still doing that. Maybe we're just exploring it like, okay, only do it on Monday or only weekends. But what I feel like as we clear the somatic more, then you would do it randomly, but you wouldn't be counting and measuring that. So like if I go out and have a drink, every now and then I'll go to a restaurant, we'll have a drink. But because of how my body feels, it doesn't really want another one.
Yeah.
Or even if I have two, I don't have another one, and I don't crave it the next day. And that's different than the way that it used to be, where it'd be like, okay, I'm going to have a drink, but I'm not going to do it again for 5 days, or I'm going to wait till the weekend.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, it's fairly miserable to be trying to override cravings the whole week. It's a fairly miserable existence. Yeah. So the somatic no, the new model somatic no, is much more easeful, a clearer relationship, a healthier relationship with these things. An interesting story on that is, as I've shared in here, I had intense chronic pain there for a long time, spinal pain. And the way that the old model kind of screwed me was when it came time to take painkillers, I had an objection to it. And that's because in the old model, it's like you're either using or you're not using. It's a strong duality. And if you're using, you're always at risk then of spiraling down. That's the model.
Yeah.
But that really wasn't my experience with these things. My experience was the compulsion was less and less around everything. But I still had this holdout in my mind that came from old recovery programs that said, don't take painkillers, even if you're in excruciating pain. So I had to do inquiry because of old model thinking. I had to do inquiry in order just to take the painkillers. That's how deep this stuff can go when you actually imagine your hand getting cut off and, you go to the doctor and it gives you painkillers and you refuse. So there for a week, you're just in pain. So I broke down and I took them for a short period of time. It was like a week, maybe 2 weeks after surgery. And I noticed that my body didn't really want that the way it used to. So before, the old model thinking would have been, if I pick it up, my body's going to crave it again, but it wasn't doing that. In fact, there was as you said, with cigarettes once, there was like my body was almost rejecting it at a certain point. So I was able to put that down, but I was still in pain. Then I went to Xanax because this is really excruciating pain. I didn't want to be on painkillers. And I tried that. The body was basically saying no to it. So Xanax was never a drug of choice. I took that for a while. And all I really needed to do as I wind down off that, I knew I didn't want to be on it long term because your body just lets you know after a while, if you're in your body, you know that you want to get off of it. But I had to start beginning to heal the pain first. So there again is working on the underlying driver. So the anger repression that was connected to my chronic pain, I had to work on that. I couldn't just put the Xanax down and then work on it because it was too painful. Couldn't even. So I was working on that while on Xanax. And then it came time when the pain got a lot better, meaning the driver was being taken care of. Then it was easier again to get off of it, because if the driver is not there strongly, you don't feel so hooked into it. But Xanax is a very powerful drug. So I had to do a lot of inquiry during the withdrawal cycle of getting off of that, where the body and the mind would try to go back to it. But I didn't need it anymore. Like physically, I didn't need it, but my mind was a little bit of. So then went to ketamine. Again, like harm reducing is what they are. Painkillers, arguably, and Xanax are pretty harmful. Ketamine still has harm to it, but maybe less. So going through that with that drug, it allowed me to really get to the root of the pain. During the time on ketamine, again, working on the drivers. So this is an active example of the new model. So I'm on ketamine, taking it every day for a while. And then the pain, though, is starting to get reduced from inquiry. So then I could get off of that. But strangely, what's been interesting is that I don't have any cravings to go back to any of that because I'm tracking my body. So my body seemed to need it when there was a lot of pain, but as the pain goes down, the addictive mind isn't coming in there. Before, it would have been like a psychological thing too. It's like not just physical dependence, but you think you need it. That's not there. So I can trust my body completely now. I can feel, what do I need or what I don't need, and let that be the gauge. And what ends up happening is that I don't want those heavy drugs because the pain isn't there. It's been dealt with. So that's a really good example, because from all the old model literature, they would basically say that in most cases, or many cases, if painkillers are your drug of choice, like they were for mine, if I pick them up again, I'm going to be spiraling downward. So this kind of defies a lot of the common, knowledge around this stuff, because the old rules don't necessarily apply in the same way when you start doing this work.
Yeah. There's some in the usual addiction work, not the new model. There's this knowledge which I verified. And let's say you go into action phase, like you stop and you are sober for some time, and then when one relapses, one very quickly is at the same level of frequency as one was stopped.
Yes.
So it's business back to usual. And another thing, I guess, that I can see inspired by the talk, to calibrate absence of compulsion. So somehow I don't have a problem with alcohol, thankfully. And so I can have a beer. I don't want to have 2 beers. And I often get a non-alcoholic beer. So I can see it's like you have this with the Mickey Mouse or my mother. Mickey Mouse, let's say not being my mother. Anyway, Mickey Mouse evokes no reaction. but let's say the president or some family member evokes some reaction. So the same, like beer, nothing. So I will see how it goes as I process more the drivers towards substances. But let's get into this. So we keep using drivers, but for some people they might still we need to slow it down. So from what I got from you, the main drivers for addiction, which are the main sources of suffering, Buddha called it suffering, right? And there's life is suffering and there's a way out. So from what I got from you is that these limiting core beliefs, so that you coined deficiency stories, deficiency story identity. So this is one major driver, like I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me, or even things like I can't trust people, I have to hide, it's not safe to love, it's not safe to be open, I can't be myself. So limiting operational patterns or this kind of identity, something wrong with me. So that's a driver. And why? I mean, this is painful when one has such thoughts. There's pain in the body too. It's just ongoing, like pain in us. Another one, I guess, unresolved emotional issues, like unforgiveness, betrayal, stuff like that. Unprocessed. Let's say I was betrayed and somebody left me and cheated, and I don't quite process that. And then you have a lifetime of things like that. So that again, if it's unprocessed, then it tries to come up. So I don't know how to process it, and I don't want to process it. Resistance, repression, bam. I need to use to medicate that. Another one would be like trauma. Unprocessed trauma will automatically create craving. And actually, there are studies, scientific, the more trauma one had, the more prone to addiction one is. Another driver would be shame, which from one end, it comes down to some deficiency story, but even the shame about using and the shame and that it's another driver. So that's why this new model of non-shaming completely then takes that out. Then, I mean, as you mentioned about chronic pain, which is from an angle some legitimate one in a way. I think that also the actual repression. I mean, repression that, and I know this in myself. There are all kind of feelings that were so locked into the vaults of the subconscious, like hatred. I didn't think I have hatred for anybody. I'm loving, Buddhist, non-dual practitioner, but like hatred towards people in my life, grief that hasn't been allowed, anger hasn't been allowed, fear hasn't been allowed. So this is a major one. And I noticed diminishing of craving by diminishing of this repression. It was like seriously. I guess another driver would be external pressure, people pressuring us to quit. So can we, any comments on that? I mean, I'm just paraphrasing your work, man. So
well, you mentioned everything. So the drivers that we see are, a lot of this is science-based. It's some of it science isn't studying yet, like shame. I don't see a lot of studies on how shame produces craving or compulsion, but we see it all the time. But a lot of these things are backed by science. So deficiency stories, self-limiting beliefs, trauma, shame, emotional issues, including emotional repression. But with chronic pain, which can be a driver, it could be a purely physical issue, but sometimes those things are a result of trauma and emotional repression. So people might have pain and they're medicating it, but not recognizing that there are things under that pain, which makes it more complicated. But it's really, once you know that, you have a way in. And if you don't know what your pain is about, if it's emotional, but you think it's physical, what can you do about that other than take painkillers? But if you find that it's emotional, you get to the root of it. Another thing that might not be obvious to people is the belief in being an addict or being addicted is connected to a deficiency story. And there's some science that basically says, if I believe I'm addicted, chances are I'm going to act out that pattern. And science doesn't break it down very well because they don't talk about self-limiting beliefs, but it sounds to me like that's a self-limiting belief. Like if I believe that I'm that, then I'm going to manifest that more and more.
Yeah.
And then external pressure is another one that isn't obvious. And you said it enough around it, but it's a big driver for people. Along with that is approval, because the external pressure to quit is often accompanied by approval when you're sober. Now that sounds great, except for the mind remembers that. And then, you know, you lose all your approval when you relapse sometimes, or you might perceive that you do that. So there's a tricky thing with approval in recovery. It's the same way with external pressure to quit is a driver. And frankly, sometimes the approval becomes a driver for recovery. Like, so if I am in recovery and I get approval from everybody in my family, that might drive me to stay in recovery. But it's also a setup, because then if I relapse, I've lost the approval. Apparently, in my mind, I've lost the approval of everyone. So one more thing I was going to say about that, you mentioned it, is not dealing with the drivers sometimes will make a relapse worse. And I don't think this is obvious for people, but just hear me out. So if you identify with clean time, a relapse is going to be a destruction of your identity, the one that you formed. It's going to be very painful. But on top of that, see, if we don't focus on the drivers, then picking up alcohol again, the drivers are still active. So they're still there. So there's some truth to it. Like when I pick back up, I spiral down. If I haven't dealt with the drivers, that's an issue in the old model for me, because if I use something, I want to let that be just a blip on the screen. I don't want it to be about my ultimate identity. And I don't want relapses to be bad if they don't have to be. And I don't even call them relapses, because even that sounds like makes a huge deal out of it. But just resuming use, if I don't make a big deal out of it and I stick to inquiry, the relapse or the resuming use is very helpful, because then I can really see what the drivers were around that. But if I don't ever resume use, I may not ever see that. So we don't encourage resuming use. We don't do it either way, but we know that people are either going to use or not use. That's just how it is. So we're just making sure not to shame people around that, because again, it can make the relapse worse. Yeah. Oh, one other thing that I feel like this work takes some of the mystery out of addiction in a way, because like people hear these, or they see these studies or these articles that say trauma is driving addiction or shame drives addiction, but it's almost theoretical until you start seeing it in your experience. Like, and so when you go into inquiry, you make direct contact with the shameful thoughts and feelings and the deficiency story and the trauma, and you can connect it up to the craving, because even the cravings will even come in during inquiry. Like as you meet a pain, you'll see beer. So you're actually seeing it all there in inquiry, where it's no longer theoretical. And I think that helps people, because if it's just theoretical, it's like, I don't know how to get at that. It's like, oh, even if science is right about that, what do I do about that? You know, you have to have a way in. And so we have a way in now. So it's not as much of a mystery, which means that what I've been saying to people is, again, coming from the old model, there's this thinking that I can put something down for good if I still have drivers underneath it. We have all the evidence in the world that that really doesn't work, because if I'm putting it down and I still have the drivers and the trauma, I may be miserable in recovery. Like you said, there's one example of it. But the other thing is like putting the cart before the horse. Like, why should I expect, if trauma and shame are driving my addiction, why should I expect to be able to put that down completely if I still have those things? See, this takes the mystery out of it, because if I was still using something through the years, I could just see that, well, of course, the drivers are still there. I shouldn't expect anything different. But in the old model, it's like almost magical thinking in a way. It's like out of the blue, you're going to be able to put this down and be done with it forever without dealing with that underlying stuff. Like, how is that reasonable? Knowing what we know about science and things that drive that. So I just think it's a good, the new model is a good way to track your experience, because you know, in some of the old ways, you're not really tracking it. All you're doing is tracking your sobriety. So you're lost. If you start to use again, you're lost. You don't even have insight as to what's driving it really. You don't have a way in. But this, you have a way in. So you can see, for example, I couldn't put down the ketamine as long as there's certain drivers were there. So it made sense that I wouldn't try to put the cart before the horse. I didn't try to put it down.
Mhm.
So putting it down came naturally and was not a struggle. Xanax wasn't really a struggle because I saw where the drivers were. And as long as they were still active, I expected that to be there. So it just helps. Like, it gives us insight that we don't normally have about what's going on with us.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm open to the possibility, and I've seen cases that for 12-step work, and actually 12-step work seems to be the most effective so far, helped many people save lives. And I can see if one is actively, earnestly doing 12-step, but actually, you know, doing the inventory, changing, connecting, anyway, so one is actively doing it, then one somehow to some degree diminishes the drivers. And I have met people who they are really thriving in their life, and they, you know, that help them, you know.
Yeah,
So you see that the new model of processing the drivers can happen, although one doesn't know about it.
yeah, right. It does happen for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, the idea, and I verify this myself and clients I have, so the way to go is to work on the stuff, basically, kind of work with the repression, work with the abandonment. I mean, process therapeutically, ideally somatic based, to process all of this, to process the shame, to process the deficiency story. Even the need for approval underneath has some, I'm not good enough, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So to actively work at those, that's the way to go, until they discharge, until they are not believed anymore, you know?
Right. And along the way, just being realistic about it, because if they're diminished, then you might find the compulsion is diminished. That's what I mean, like tracking it that way. Inside and outside are one, you know. So if I'm still believing this in here, I'm probably going to manifest externally that thing.
Yeah.
So let's make room for those people who, again, you're not doing it, but getting away from the using and not using. Make room for those people who are experiencing diminishment of compulsion and diminishment of drivers. And that to me is still success. Like, even though it's not based on using or not using. Yeah, because you've even expressed that. You said, like, with one of the addictions you were working with recently, you said, how did you say it? Oh, that it was diminishing. Yeah, it started diminishing or something. Or did you experience it as like just a complete letting go of the compulsion, or was like over time clearing up the drivers changed? I'm just curious because I don't know.
Well, I noticed that I mean, I didn't know I had repression. I didn't know, though I'm a therapist, yeah. Although Freud talks about it, right? So working with you, then all this stuff came up, and somehow I started to process some deep wounds that I processed before, but for the KI, it was more thoroughly. And I think as a result of that, that came another, like, hey man, I can stop this now. So I didn't come as a willpower. So I dropped the weed. And then I noticed that I was okay. But because I think all of that was not boiling underneath. You know, it's a lot of energy needs to be used to manage this unprocessed subconscious stuff. So I noticed more clear in my body, and yeah, and so also recently with your help, I mean, I really processed some deep stuff, and a lot of grief and a lot of stuff came out. So after that, and then also I stopped, you know, I think maybe another, we can call it another driver, is resisting your suffering. I would have certain feeling of being alone, in the world, or feeling of being alone, you know, the abandonment stuff. And I would resist it. I will escape it, even with guided meditation, with meditation, with anything. And at some point, I doing this work, I started to be able to take it, to allow that feeling, to allow it, and to take it, and then that I could see, oh wow, I can do it. Wow, huh. So I think that was a major breakthrough. So then if I could take it, I don't need to escape it. You know what I mean? So I don't need to use it. So they were very empowering, very empowering. And so yeah, I could see that some diminishing of the marijuana, at least now. I mean, I don't want to do it as I did. I don't. I was like, and I still want to be open to it, and I use it sometimes in a special way. Anyway, so now, but I could see the shifting, the shifting, and there's still, okay, I'm free from the marijuana, but I'm still drinking this. Anyway, so I want, if we can, I mean, unless you have a comment, I want to go into this. You had a video recently, like, hey, the new model, but don't bullshit yourself. New model, you are not doing new model if you don't investigate before use and after use. Otherwise, you're just pretending. Yeah, it's just self-deceit.
Yeah.
I started to be more serious about that, but you know, it requires a serious commitment, man. I mean, you have the craving, and you're like, okay, stop. So yeah, can you speak a little bit about this? To be a real new model of recovery and not bullshit oneself. What does it mean to inquire before and after?
Yeah, well, there's other facets to that.
Yeah,
new models before and after, but another big facet of that, I've had a couple of friends who became aware of my work, and they were in active addiction. So they like the no shaming and non-punishing, non-judgmental part of it. So they were actually using that to justify the using. Like nobody needs to tell me anything. You need to not pressure me. You don't have any, so they're using it as a way, again, to strengthen the compulsion. So it's like the new model can get hijacked by that mind that isn't really interested in looking at all this, but wants to use the benefits of it to further strengthen. So I eventually had to say to them, like, that's not new model, that's just using, which is fine, but that's what it is. Don't call it new model, because we're doing something here particularly. We're not just non-shaming and non-judgment around everything. The other thing I know, when you were sharing your story, I thought there's a big difference between like putting something down but not vilifying it. The difference between that and putting something down and then vilifying it. So because when you do that, and that happens in a lot of those old models, is if I vilify the thing that I'm trying to quit, now it's a forbidden fruit. So now I've said that I can't have it, or I'm against it, and being against it, that resistance actually creates more craving. So it's nice. I know exactly what you mean. Like if you let something go, you're not preoccupied with it. You're not vilifying it. You're also not like worshiping it either. You're not, but it's like a healthier relationship. So you can indulge in it, but you're not making it into a bad thing, or you're a bad person anymore if you do it. And that seems to matter on this path, how we don't vilify these things anymore, or ourselves for using them.
Yeah. You know, I verified this in a client of mine who had more like higher level of addiction, to the point that's dangerous, and that requires detox. So he would come to me and then disappear, come to me and disappear. And then I came back to me, and he told me like, hey, when you told me about the new model, I liked it, but I just went on using, you know. So I was like, yeah, but he wasn't inquiring. So, and then he told me that he also, his conscience knew that's not okay. So he didn't come to me anymore. So I think there are special cases, especially when advanced stages of addiction, that, you know, one needs to detox basically. No?
I would say yes, for sure. Because you think of that place where people are in, everybody's in a different place. But if you're in this and you're just hearing about this inquiry or this whole model, you're so new to it that you still have that old consciousness that, that's the addict brain. So you're gonna hear everything from that.
Mhm.
So even if you throw new model stuff out there, the brain is gonna hear it like the
Mhm.
way he heard it. So I think there is like some danger in
Mhm.
not recognizing that people are in different places. And in non-duality we say it's all, there is no different places, but there really are. Like, people are in
Yeah,
different places with all this. So how we talk to them
yeah.
does matter. Yeah.
All right, so let's get more, let's say, experiential here a little bit. So, I studied this awareness-based somatic psychotherapy, Hakomi, and they had a whole section on addiction. And they were talking about this process called surfing the urge. But yeah, surfing the urge, meaning that there's the urge, the craving, and then to kind of drop into a mindful state and to simply witness the discomfort in the body and to identify where is it. It's in the belly, there's an emptiness, there is a knot, there's a burning. To really witness it and not do what it says, just witness it, letting it be as it is. It's interesting, as I talk about this, I feel more in my chest stuff. That's unusual. Anyway, so they were saying to do that, and they were saying that, hey, if you can do that, because it is temporary impermanence, that will go away. So you surf the wave and okay. Also in non-duality, some very respectable and awesome teacher I like, Rupert, had a video that was giving these suggestions to this lady who was waking up in the night during the retreat and have hot chocolate. And she knew, man, that's not right. I mean, I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty. And Rupert was saying, hey, okay, it's okay. It's just next time when you want to eat hot chocolate or whatever, stop, give yourself 10 minutes to witness and allow fully the sense of lack in the body, the somatic content. And then not do what it says and just witness it. Do this for 10 minutes. And if you still want to do it, then use it. Anyway, so I can see there is something useful there, but still they are not really going to the drivers too much. I mean, yeah, maybe the sense of lack comes or the sadness, but anyway, so how would you suggest now, let's say, let's get into this inquiry before or after, or before there's this sense of lack, there's craving in the body, and I want to use the new model. Now what?
I like the approach that you were saying, but for me, a lot of this stuff is unconscious. So I look back at the drivers, deficiency story, trauma, shame, emotional repression. Those are things that are not necessarily going to show themselves completely in a moment of craving.
Yeah.
What might show up is like a sensation that feels uncomfortable in a few things, a few lack thoughts or this or that. For me, I needed to conjure it up. So these inquiries, as you know, they bring it up. So from the somatic, you make contact with the story there, and you can even inquire more deeply into the stories that come up. And because there's a mind-body connection, that goes deeper for me in the body than just being in the somatic experience, knowing the mind-body connection. So how we would do it is there's a number of different inquiries you can do before or after using something, or before and after. But one simple one to get started with is to deal with preoccupation. And this is just the surface level, really, for me. It doesn't go deep to the drivers, but just reverse inquiry. I can take you through it or demonstrate it. Just how do you want me to talk about it?
I remember we talked a little bit last time, and it's a good, you can walk me through it or demonstrate it.
Yeah, if we've already demonstrated, maybe I shouldn't go into too much detail.
We just talked that basically the first level is the preoccupation, which is two opposing forces that I really want it, I need it, I want it, give it to me,
right,
and I shouldn't have it, it's bad.
Yeah,
splitting them
so
apart.
the I shouldn't want it is the vilifying of the substance. is I shouldn't have it, or I need to stop. And there's making it into a problem itself makes the craving stronger. So preoccupation, we will deal with both sides of that coin. So for craving, if I say, if this is a glass of beer or something, and I'm sitting here and I really want to drink it, but I'm trying to get myself not to. So I might say, as a reverse inquiry, I don't want the beer, which is the reverse of the actual story, the story as I want it. So I don't want the beer. And then a slew of things come up to watch. Like, oh, it would feel so good. I'm just resting with that. Other words, pictures that come up, just staying in that, resting as awareness, being with all of those. And then going to the aversion mind, which is, it's perfectly okay for me to drink beer. No, I'm a failure if I do it. I'm never going to quit. I'll be out of control. So just running through those two lines, actually, if you do that before using, if you do it thoroughly, your compulsion should come down in that moment to where it's like, you feel like you have more of a choice, more like a choice to do it or not. Mm-hmm. But then you might want to also look at some of the drivers before and after. Mm-hmm. So if you can, well, one driver we all have is shame, pretty much. So you can pretty much guess there's some of that there. So you could say, I don't have any shame about drinking this beer, or some other shame inquiry that brings that to the surface to see it. Or like, again, if you can eliminate the deficiency stories. When Dan and I were working together, he was really good at illuminating exactly what the stories were. So it wasn't just fishing around for whatever sticks. It's like he knew that using meant that he was nothing and would be a failure, a relapse, a setback. So we did inquiry on that driver, the belief that he's nothing. Because of the porn watching, he's nothing. And that's just his story. So he would look at that before the using. He would actually look at the deficiency story, like saying the opposite of it. Like, I forgot what his opposite was. It would be something like, I don't know what it was, but that would pull up the thoughts, I'm nothing, and the feelings and sensations. So that would further diminish the craving. So what I feel like is happening partly with the new model is when you inquire before and after, you're cleaning up that psychic energy around the use, like whatever word I'm using, like that energy that gets accumulated around the event gets cleaned up before and after. And then you start to experience more of a choice. And in some of those times you'll choose not to use. And you gain a confidence in that. I don't know how else to say it. Like there's a confidence, like I'm not being run by this. I'm not being driven by this. But these inquiries that you do before and after, that's just kind of on the craving itself. You want to step back and just do inquiry outside of those compulsions around the drivers, because when you have a compulsion, you're lucky if you can sit down and really set through some things, because there's a certain compulsion gets to a certain level where it's like the point of no return. Like I'm going to have this no matter what. And then the focus becomes on that, where you can't really sit down and look. So look at whatever you can before and after, but spend some time when you're not in the craving to really go deep on those issues that you mentioned, like unresolved grief, emotional stuff, trauma, shame.
Yeah, I like that. That's very, so two aspects of the inquiry is, working with someone or in therapy or by yourself when you are not craving, and so what I usually like to do with myself or others is like, I also get mindful. It's not cognitive. It's not just cognitive. So get more mindful, aware, and then bring up, even I do with people, I have them bring up the drug of choice in the field. Have them, hey, just whatever, the scotch, your favorite glass, your joint, your paraphernalia, just see it here, just see it, witness it, and to make it really here. And that by itself stirs stuff in the body. And so I'm just stirring things to be here. And then I go into the preoccupation, like, hey, witness this, whatever comes, I have no desire, no need to ever use this. And be like, no, bullshit, whatever. And the other one, it's fine to use this as much as I can. So I follow your model to, actually, this stuff brings more somatic content usually and flashes out more things. And then I go into some next level. I do this on anyway. So there's this office work or by oneself work, and then there is the compulsion work in the moment. Then maybe the in the moment might be shorter or not so thorough. But for both, I think a next level down would be this. Okay, what is this giving me that I don't already have? And sometimes this may come by itself in the preoccupation. It's like, I don't want this. I don't want this tobacco. And it will come. I notice with many people, this is my friend. This is my friend. This is my only friend. So right there, that's indication of the driver. And so, yeah, I tried with, to ask, what is this give me that I don't already have? And then it will say, well, I want relief. I want relief. I want connection. And then going deeper into reversing those. And somehow I think in this second or third level of inquiries, one of the drivers will make itself known, right? And then we'll go deeper into that.
Yes.
Can you?
Yeah. And that's a good point, is like it's organic and intuitive. So it's not like you necessarily set out to look at something. You follow what's really relevant there in the moment. So, and the other thing, just to remind people who are doing this, I don't know if you're this deep into inquiry, but things like I can connect with people, like we've talked about that one. It feels important to feel into the area of the body that has the craving or the compulsion, because if you drop out of it, you might say, I can connect with people. And it's like, yes, I can. But then down in that sensation, the information is different. So that's another thing to say, is that we're basing it all in the somatic, because that's where the juice is. What we really believe is connected to there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't add anything to what you said. I mean, you either go down the shame tunnel or the deficiency story or repression, depending on what's there. And it should be said that you have to come back to these. So I think we can put to bed the idea that there's a magic pill out here, because I think people are still looking for that. I haven't found it, and I'd be wary of it if I found it, because we have a lot of stuff. How is something going to go all the way around that, you know? So that's part of it, is just having this kind of a mature attitude around that, knowing that this does take time. This is a lifelong habit of learning things and being conditioned. So it's not like we're going to meet one inquiry and then all of our addictions are, but if you stick with it, it does fall away. We've seen that in many people now. So we can trust that trajectory is happening with people when they're inquiring deeply. Yeah. I was all over the place there, but.
No, it's great. Yeah, there's this organic nature of the somatic investigation that I see with people I work with, that something comes up, something juicy. When something juicy comes up, then I go with that. Like, I'm selfish. All right, so this is going to be about that, investigating. And I it's very important when investigate seemingly cognitively. So I'm looking at people and I say, oh, I can, it's safe to love. It's safe to be vulnerable. So looking at the people, but if there's any somatic the content in the body, so to look at the people and to feel into that area. So that brings more content. Other times something comes up, like in the preoccupation inquiry, something comes up like as a memory. So now that's a memory. Then we go the memory, that's some kind of unprocessed grief or unprocessed something. But basically, I like you said it one time, which is very non-dual. That it has to be our you call it like a relentless repetition, which some good non-duality, they speak about that in a way that, hey, we have layer and layer of sense of separation layered in the mind and in the body for decades. So there will be the persistent deconditioning. and some good non-duality teachers, they speak about that, although it's not very clear how that is going to happen, or it's more like, yeah, but like some relentless, persistent, yeah.
But it's done from awareness. Like, so we're always basing it and looking from awareness, which is kind of just at rest, like just here and now. That's important to say, because otherwise the mind could say, oh my God, I've got to just go through this relentless thing. And then it gets into more seeking. It's an awareness based inquiry. So when you're resting, you're just letting things be as they are, as they come up.
Yeah.
So, but it's relentlessly coming back to the same programs that you're still believing, like turning back towards it instead of just doing it once or a few times and assuming that you've seen through it.
And you know what I like about this KI? Like you and me, or many people hearing us, I mean, we have this clear understanding that, or let's say we have some awakening to our true nature. Yeah, that I'm not the body, I'm not Mihai, I'm not the ego, I'm the presence of awareness. And so actually you created this from that vista. And ultimately is not just for healing or processing trauma, is for liberation from suffering and in embodiment of the awakening. Yeah. So you don't speak about it so much. I mean, you do. We don't bring it here now. So, but it is from this perspective, and it helps from awakening and embodiment, liberation perspective. But strangely, it is very effective. I noticed this KI with people who have no interest in liberation and who have never done meditation before. Of course, I need to educate them a little bit how to witness and some basic stuff, but it's very versatile and can be used as a straight up effective somatic modality, healing modality.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are not interested that come to this. They're not necessarily interested in the non-dual awakening or the enlightenment. And the reason that I think it works is because we all have the same drivers are similar, and our makeup is similar. Words, pictures, feelings, and sensations happening in awareness. So it makes sense that whether you're interested in that or not, it's still going to show up for you that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the nice bonus is that, let's say, somebody who is not interested per se in seeking enlightenment, but somehow due to suffering is getting involved with KI, at some point we have a glimpse like, oh, wow, these thoughts are falling away, and there's this, so they have a glimpse of some awakening in the middle of it. So it's like an extra bonus.
Mm-hmm. That has happened to me the other day. A guy who really wasn't focused on awakening. He was processing some old deficiency story, and he got a moment of, he said, like perfect peace, because he was just connecting to that awareness. So then he became interested in enlightenment after that. But before, he was just wanting to process his stuff. Mm-hmm. So that can happen too.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that there is anything else that's important we haven't touched upon from the point of view of a thorough depiction of the new model?
Well, we didn't go into super great detail about how to do the inquiries, because I don't know if this is exactly the right form for that, but there are ways to learn what we're doing outside of this interview. And so we're just kind of talking about the context. We did a little bit of how to, but if people are listening and they're like, I didn't get enough from that, there's ways to go and learn this work.
So if you have 10 minutes, do you still have some 10 minutes or so?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we can do more like a fast, like you can just do just a faster, like, they have in theater. I once was acting, and sometimes they do the whole play fast, bloop, 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 to practice the lines, which is cool. The Italian run through.
Yeah. We could do that. And just for the people watching, we're going to end it in about 10 minutes. That doesn't mean the inquiry is done. It just means we're just going to give you a little overview of it, see how it works, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
And definitely go and the Kyo series. It's a the intro and all the tools are there. And anyway, who is watching this probably is interested in that. So yeah.
Yeah. So what's the compulsion that you want to work with, since we're talking about that?
As we just spoke about this, something in my chest gets a contracted energy. So we can look into this kratom.
Okay.
Anyway, it's unusual. It's some kind of plant which can become an addiction and stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's just show them preoccupation first. So come down and bring awareness to that chest sensation. Just let it be in the space, in presence by itself for a moment. Then pull up the image of kratom, or you taking it, or something that feels seductive.
Yeah, and the place where I go and have it, it's nice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I don't even want to have kratom. I don't want it. What comes up?
I don't want it. It comes. I'm going to go today and have a kratom.
There you go. So let that be.
Because I didn't have yesterday, so I need to have today.
Mm-hmm. Right. So allow yourself to have that thought. Like, let it be there, but you're aware of it. The words, you hear them or see them.
Like, don't mess with me. Don't.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have it.
Yeah. So just letting all those be, seeing them from awareness.
It's interesting. This is slightly diminished. The actual contractions slightly diminished.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So just because we're only doing about 10 minutes, let's just move to aversion so you can see some of this also. So aversion is I shouldn't have it, or I shouldn't do it, or something like that. So the inquiry is, it's perfectly okay for you to go have kratom today.
Yeah, I can use kratom every day, anytime I want.
Mm-hmm.
Some more spreading of sensation, and then the thought, no man, what the fuck are you doing? You are bullshitting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not aligned with my path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let that be.
Not okay.
Let these, just observing these thoughts now. So in observing, you're just, for the people who are listening, you're not thinking about it. He's just observing the words as they arise and fall.
The words fell, and it's the actual sensation going towards my belly and solar plexus.
Right. So if it was a real inquiry, we'd probably stay on craving and aversion for a moment, like preoccupation. But let's just go into that stomach sensation, just feel into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to find out what driver may be here, what does the stomach sensation mean about you?
Something is missing. Let's say I'm missing something. There's a sense of lack.
Okay. So I could just have you observe those words, but let's turn that into an inquiry. I'm not missing anything. Nothing is missing. See what objections come up.
Deep, meaningful, loving connection is missing.
There you go. Observe that. Feel that.
Yeah, this brings some sadness. But it feels good to feel sad, this sadness.
Mhm. Just let it be.
This is one of my deepest program, which I don't believe anymore, but it comes like, I'm alone.
Mhm.
I'm alone in the whole world.
Right. And is that connected to the stomach? Do you feel that there? I'm alone.
Yeah, it's in the solar plexus, and I need to change this state. I want to change this state. I don't want to feel,
Okay. Yeah.
I want to feel
S-
good.
So you could do an inquiry out of aloneness, but another one would be to feel into the stomach. I want to feel this emotion.
I want to feel this emotion fully. It comes like, yeah, I don't know, a little resistance.
So let that be just a little resistance.
I'm not afraid to feel this.
Mhm.
I want to feel these feelings fully. Yeah,
Get a yes on that.
yeah.
So
Um,
then let's bring that feeling up more, or the story. So if you reverse that, I'm not alone in this world,
yeah, so the
feeling
feeling
down
goes
here.
away, but we can take the driver. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Here comes the voice like, yes, you are.
Hmm. Yeah, so let that be true. That you're with it from awareness.
So it comes also that I'm not alone. The
Mm.
whole, I worked with this. I'm like, the whole world is my family.
Yeah.
This could be a reverse inquiry, but let's say the whole world is my family.
Hmm. So, just for the sake of time, we could just go into shame just to show people how it would work, but it might happen more organically in a session
Yeah,
like it.
we
Yeah.
can skip now. Let's try some more other
Yeah.
angles just for the
Hmm.
purposes of demo.
Right. So we've just done, for everybody's benefit, we've just did a little bit of emotional repression work. When we say, I want to feel that, there's a little bit on that driver. We've done a little bit on deficiency story. I'm alone. So we're hitting various drivers, but we're not staying yet on each one very deeply.
Yeah,
So,
and also
yeah.
this deficiency story, I'm alone. I mean, there is what is called therapeutically attachment disruption, attachment wound there, abandonment, what they call abandonment. So that's trauma there, that it's processed a lot of it, but we can go into all of that for like 4 sessions.
Yeah.
Back out and go somewhere else now.
So let's just work with the shame. And one inquiry that is good, because with addiction, we hide and lie, and that, further strengthens the shame and the compulsion. So
Yeah.
one of the inquiries is just kind of feeling into wherever you find energy in the body, just kind of feeling into it and saying this: I want everyone to know about all of my kratom use.
I want everybody to know about my addiction, my addictions. I want everybody to know. I mean, now I'm putting myself on YouTube and everybody knows, but it's a little bit like residual, like, no, man, I need to look good. I need to look good.
Let that be.
I need to keep the image of spiritual teacher, therapist. I don't need to hide this. I don't need to hide this.
Right. There's another, just for everybody listening, another version of a shame inquiry. He's reversing the program he has to hide.
I'm between both. Like, I know I don't need to hide, but there comes a little,
You feel that in the body, that no.
I don't need to hide.
I mean, do you feel that in the body anywhere? Or is it pretty clear?
What I had here, it's much lighter. There's still, it's not a contraction. It's more like flow of energy. There's something still there. But basically that's empty now because I'm doing this every YouTube knows, so I'm no need to hide.
Yeah, right. So just where we are right now, is the compulsion less? Just the feeling of wanting that today. It wasn't strong to begin with, but we just did a little bit. It's okay if it's not. I just want people to hear where you're at with it.
I do want to go to that place because it's a nice place. And I like being there in that cafe where they have the drink. I want to be there. It's nice to look at the people. I don't need to have kratom. I could have something else. I could have some tea.
Yeah, right.
And I could have kratom too. I don't want to fight it. But I don't know. I want to go there. It's nice.
So it feels like more of a choice. See that?
Yeah.
Feels like it. Like you could say no, but you go a lot deeper than what we did. You go deeper on your own, I'm sure, than what we did.
I mean, I have kratom here. But I don't want to do it. I can make it my own and all of that. But I can see that I don't want to do it.
There you go. There's a little taste for everybody, but obviously it goes much deeper than that.
Yeah. So, this was fast, like a Sicilian run through, they call it in theater. But this would be slow and taking the time. And also I process this quite a bit, but it can come really strong at the beginning. And so, yeah. So I think that's pretty good enough for this topic.
Yeah, one other thing, we'll just talk about environment, because people who were open to the new model, if you have people around you who are what we call old modeling you, which is they're trying to get you to quit and they're doing that external pressure on you, it can be challenging to do this work in that environment because you're constantly being re-triggered back into external pressure. So just for those people coming to this, your environment does matter. If you're surrounded by people who know what you're doing, who understand the context where they might be able to support you in that. But if they're coming from some of the old views, it could be challenging. And I don't know what to say. You can't divorce your family. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you got to be aware of that if you do this.
Yeah. And so, the client I told you, it's very, is going now through the ringer. His girlfriend is, actually, they are both interested in KI and this kind of work. And his girlfriend is naturally compassionate and non-judgmental. And so that's lucky for him. And also I had some session with her. This is just a little bit of education. Hey, just let you know what you are dealing with here. It's nothing to do with you. This stuff is prior to you coming to a picture, and it will be helpful if you don't do that. And if you do that, this being said, he goes crazy. Tell him, dude, I can't do it. I'm going to go to my aunt, but I'll be back. I love you. I'll be back. I just need to, so to strengthen the that there is a new model environment.
Right, but then just imagine if she wasn't like that, how that would,
Yeah.
like if she was, he'd have to hide it from her completely
Yeah.
then, and then that's more compulsion, hiding, addiction.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you for bringing this into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
God is speaking through you, like through other people and through me and everybody.
There you go.
All right. All right. Well, may it benefit everybody. And I'll put here also some link to previous talks and also some link to some videos from Scott going into addiction. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, as always.